Good morning, students. Yesterday we had started this topic, historical evidence from inscriptions, and I told you two major differences between the field of epigraphy and paleography. Right, students. Sometimes you might appear, it might appear that to you that yes, these are confusing things. Yes, maybe they are, but as a student of history, you ought to know them. Okay, use your head, work hard, remember them. Okay, so epigraphy is the study of ancient inscriptions as it is there mentioned in the first line itself to find out how epigraphists and historians work. So that's what I told you yesterday. It is a study of ancient inscriptions, and inscriptions, what are inscriptions? They are usually the things that are inscribed on manuscripts or rocks. It is not written, inscription is not something which is written on a piece of paper or written on the barks of the trees. It is usually engraved on stones and monuments. So those are inscriptions, and the people and the specialized with people with specialized skills who actually study and decipher those inscriptions and understand those inscriptions, date those inscriptions, are known as epigraphists. And the people who are the people who study handwritings? We had also seen yesterday that the people who actually are who look into different handwritings are the ones who are known as paleographists, and because the stream is of this knowledge is known as paleography. Now this is about ancient handwriting, and not just about the handwriting of it, but the good ones, the good paleographists even tell you, how old that handwriting is, whether that handwriting is extinct, the origin of those handwritings, um, the date of those handwritings, everything. So they are the ones now. Coming to the other paragraph, you may also have noticed that Ashoka claims that earlier rulers had no arrangements to receive reports from different parts of the kingdom. If you consider the political history of the subcontinent before Ashoka, do you think this statement is true? Now, this is a question which has been thrown to you and me. Now, do you think it is true that Ashoka could have ruled over such a vast geography without receiving reports from his officials stationed in different parts of his empire? What do you think? That's what the question which is being asked, and this is something which I would like you to definitely today. I think this chapter would come to an end, and I would like you to answer this question. I would surely ask this question. Now, historians have to make other assessments as well. Now, if a king's orders were inscribed on natural rocks near cities or important routes of communication, would passers-by have stopped to read them? Most people were probably not literate. Did everybody throughout the subcontinent understand the Prakrit used in Patliputra? Would the orders of the king have been followed? Answers to such questions are not always easy to find. Yes, it's students, that is true. Even today, when you use a bit of your common sense, we might all be literate, we might all be educated, right? But then, say, in those times, that is 2300 years ago, 2400 years ago, definitely everyone did not know how to read and write, right? But then that does not mean that the message which the ruler wanted to communicate would not get communicated, or if some inscriptions have been made by and have been issued and ordered by the ruler or the empire for that matter, uh, that message would not get communicated just because everyone cannot read or write. Even today, students, does it not happen that, say, for example, someone reads a newspaper, someone reads a book, right? All of us can read and write, but someone reads it and then we ask him, अरे यार क्या था न्यूज़पेपर में, what was the news today, अरे क्या देखा तुमने, अरे what was there, अरे यार उस बुक में क्या है, तुमने तो पढ़ा, let us know. And then he tells you about, अरे नहीं यार, it was a boring book, or he would tell you something about what interesting was there in that book, or the message that book communicates to you. So it is not that if people couldn't read or write, so we should automatically and naturally assume that the message was not getting communicated. Even if one or two people among those 100 or among that 50 could read or write, he could read that inscription and let the others know what it was about. So let us not automatically come to a conclusion that yes, the messages were not getting communicated. But then yes, this is an assumption just which I just made. But is this assumption true? It could be true, but 100% true? Really can't say. No one can say. Right? So, coming to the second paragraph, some of the problems are evident if we look at the Ashokan inscription, which has often been interpreted there is source 11 as reflecting the anguish of the ruler, as well as marking a change in his attitude towards warfare. As we shall see, the situation becomes much more complex once we move beyond reading the inscription at the face value. Uh, Now, while this is very interesting, while Ashokan inscriptions have been found in present day Orissa, the one depicting his anguish about what definitely the Kalinga War is missing. So, in other words, the inscription has not been found in the region that was conquered. So, what are we to make of that? So, what the book is asking is, we often talk about the remorse which Ashoka felt after the Kalinga War, and he has written in great detail about how resentful he felt about it, about the loss of life and so many being taken captive and mutilated soldiers and everything like that. But he expresses all that regret and anguish in an inscription which is not there in Kalinga. So what is the what are we supposed to make from all this? What does it essentially tell you about? You know, so the limitations of inscriptional evidence. So naturally, we come to this. All inscriptions may be damaged. Inscriptions may be damaged, or the letters could be missing. Besides, it's not always easy to be sure about the exact meaning of the words used in inscriptions, some of which may be specific to a particular place of time. If you go through the epigraphical journal, you would realize the scholars are constantly debating and discussing alternative ways of reading inscriptions. Students, you have to understand, even today, in spite of all the technology that is available to us, all the documentation that can be done today in very efficient manner, that is, we still would have. Do you think the same Hindi gets spoken in Bihar and the same Hindi gets spoken in Ahmedabad, or the Hindi which is spoken in Rajasthan is exactly similar to the Hindi that gets spoken in Chhattisgarh, and how they write it and how they comprehend it and how they understand it? No, not at all. Absolutely not at all. Right? Because different people in different areas have always had their own way of understanding that, what is convenient for them, what they have historically been, because they would have one language which would be their their forefathers have been speaking for generations. It could be Odia, it could be Bengali, or it could be Bhojpuri. But then again, this there's something which is the language which is patronized by the official class, or the language which is spoken and patronized as part of the official language. Then naturally that effect of Bengali also comes in Hindi, that effect of Oriya comes in Hindi, that effect of Gujarati comes in Hindi, that effect of Bhojpuri comes in Hindi. So that's how it is. So imagine a situation, or an inscription which you are reading about. um, you cannot say that it would have been completely, or rather that influence would have been absent completely. Not at all. So today, if you want to understand all these things only through inscriptions and reach at conclusions only through inscriptions, it is not going to be very, very accurate at all. And that's what the limitations that we are talking about. Because times change, languages change. That's what human history is about. That's what human journey is about. Okay, although several thousand inscriptions have been discovered, not all have been deciphered, published, and translated. Besides, many more inscriptions must have existed which have not survived the ravages of time. So, what is available at present is probably only a fraction of what was inscribed, naturally. And there is another, perhaps more fundamental problem. Not everything that we may consider politically or economically significant was necessarily recorded in inscriptions. For instance, routine agricultural practices and the joys and the sorrows of daily existence find no mention in inscriptions at all, which focus more often than not on grand, unique events. So essentially, what they are saying is people only used to, the empires only used to record and document the stuff which was considered to be special, which was considered to be im- important, not the normal things which you and I would be interested in. Like Ashoka would have his inscriptions talking about Dhamma and his remorse and Kalinga and everything, but his inscriptions would not talk about the normal life in Patliputra and the normal life of people, because his empire stretched from one frontier to another frontier of India. So he is not talking about how the clothing, the inscriptions are not talking about how the food was different, how the clothing was different, how different festivals were being celebrated in South India and Central India had a different festival, or probably Punjab, that is today's Pakistan, would have an entirely different kind of festivals. Definitely, the inscriptions of not just Ashoka, any ruler for that matter, would remain silent on that. And normal people and common people, who mostly could not read or write, they're not going to document this is how we played Holi, for example, 2000 years ago. Now we play Holi in something which could be entirely different, or to a great extent be different than how it was being played 2000 years ago, right? But the people who were playing Holi were not documenting it, that this is how we played Holi, because it was considered to be a part of life. It was not considered to be an important or an official event that needed to be documented. So this is what they are talking about, that for a historian, it is never easy reaching a conclusion um, when you really want to come to and want to find out how the people of a particular civilization lived, and you want to understand more and more about them. So students, this chapter comes to an end. Today I'll send you the questions, and I want them to be answered naturally. So thank you. We shall start a new chapter tomorrow. Thank you.